My wife said she was bored and went to stay with her lover for excitement. I said, I hope you find it. What she got instead was divorce papers and a restraining order at his door. The words still echo in my head like they were spoken just a moment ago. I stood there, looking at her face, trying to process the way she said it so casually, like she was announcing she was going to the grocery store. No trembling in her voice, no hesitation, just a cold and bored tone, as if our marriage meant nothing more than a temporary pastime she had outgrown. My chest tightened, my throat went dry, but my lips somehow formed the words, I hope you find it. Calm, controlled. But deep inside, I was crumbling. I had loved this woman for years. I had built my life around her. Every sacrifice, every compromise, every long day at work was for us. For the future I thought we were building together. I remembered the countless nights I stayed late in the office just so we could afford the vacations she dreamed about, the little luxuries she pointed at in store windows, the house she said would make her feel safe. And now, all of that was nothing. She brushed it aside with one sentence. She was bored. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I didn't beg her to stay. Instead, I stood there quietly, staring at her as if seeing her for the first time. My silence wasn't strength. It was shock. My mind was replaying every memory at lightning speed. Our wedding day, when she smiled at me like I was her entire world. The nights we stayed up planning our future children's names. The way she once held me during my lowest moments and whispered that she would never leave. Lies. All of it now felt like lies. She didn't look back when she packed her things. She hummed to herself, even smiled at her phone a few times. I didn't need to guess who she was texting. I knew. I just stood there, numb, like a ghost in my own home. Watching her fold clothes, shove them into a bag, check her makeup in the mirror. She was getting ready for him the same way she once got ready for me. That realization cut deeper than anything she said. The pain was unbearable, but I refused to give her the satisfaction of seeing me break. When she finally walked to the door, suitcase in hand, I forced my voice to remain steady. Good luck, I said. She smirked, almost proud of herself, like she had won some twisted game. The door closed, and with it, the illusion of my marriage shattered completely. Alone in the silence of that empty house, I felt the weight of betrayal crash down on me. My chest hurt like someone was crushing it. My eyes burned, but I held the tears back. I sat on the couch, staring at the wall, trying to understand how the woman I loved could so easily walk out of my life. I kept asking myself what I did wrong. Was I not enough? Did my love bore her? Did my loyalty suffocate her? The questions had no answers, but they clawed at me endlessly. Hours passed, but I didn't move. The house felt unfamiliar, like it belonged to strangers now. Every corner held memories of her, our laughter, our fights, our plans. And yet, in that moment, I realized something devastating. She had never truly been mine. Not in the way I thought. Maybe she had been drifting away for months, even years, and I had been too blind, too trusting to see it. But one thing was clear as I sat there in the ruins of my marriage. This wasn't just the end of love. It was the end of me trusting her, of me giving her the power to destroy me again. My words to her, I hope you find it, sounded simple, almost weak on the surface. But inside they became the seed of something else, a quiet resolve, a vow. She thought she was walking away to excitement. She had no idea she was also walking straight into the consequences of her betrayal. I sat in the silence of that night replaying her words over and over again. Bored, excitement, lover. Each word pierced me like a blade, and as much as I wanted to believe this was sudden, my mind dragged me back to all the warning signs I had ignored for years. I saw them now so clearly it almost made me sick. Her late nights at work that never made sense. The way she would laugh too hard at her phone but turn the screen away when I walked into the room. The gradual coldness that replaced warmth in her eyes whenever I reached for her hand. At the time, I convinced myself it was stress, exhaustion, maybe even depression. But no, it wasn't. It was her boredom with me and her hunger for something else. Something dangerous, something I could never give her because it was built on lies. I remembered the trips I had planned, hoping to reignite the spark. The way I surprised her with a weekend getaway, only for her to scroll on her phone half the time. The fancy dinners where I tried to make her laugh, but she seemed distant, as if her mind was somewhere else. I remembered the countless arguments where I begged her to talk to me, to tell me what was wrong, and every time she dismissed me with a cold, "You're overthinking." She made me feel like I was the problem, like my insecurities were the issue. And like a fool, I believed her. I thought maybe if I was more patient, if I worked harder, if I loved her even more fiercely, she would come back to me. But now, as I sat there staring at the empty space where her suitcase had been, I realized the truth. It wasn't me. It was never me. She had been chasing thrills behind my back while I was killing myself to keep our marriage alive. That realization stung so deeply that my hands shook, but beneath the pain, a strange clarity began to form. While she was out celebrating her so-called freedom, wrapped up in the arms of her lover, I began to write things down. Every word she said before she left. Every time she had come home late. Every excuse she gave. Every account she had access to. I started to build a timeline in my mind, not just of her betrayal, but of my awakening. This wasn't going to be a story where I played the broken man begging for scraps of love. I refused to give her that victory. The more I wrote, the calmer I became. My notes weren't just about pain. They were becoming evidence. Proof of her abandonment. Proof of her choices. She thought she was clever, that she had control, but she had underestimated me. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to confront her lover like some cliché scene. My revenge wasn't going to be loud. It was going to be silent, sharp, and devastating. In the daylight that followed, I forced myself to function. I made coffee. I went through the motions. But beneath the calm exterior, every step was calculated. I started researching lawyers. I read about divorce proceedings, about abandonment, about restraining orders. I knew exactly where she was staying now. She didn't hide it. She wanted me to know, to feel humiliated. But what she didn't know was that her arrogance was giving me everything I needed. I walked through our house, and every memory felt poisoned. But instead of crying, I let the poison turn into fuel. I was done being the man who ignored the signs. I was done being the husband who took the blame for her betrayal. She thought she had won, but I was only just beginning. She had walked out chasing excitement. I was preparing to hand her the reality she never expected. Cold legal papers and a door slammed in her face by the very man she abandoned me for. The emotional storm inside me only grew with each passing day. Friends tried to reach out. They called, they texted, they invited me for drinks. Some even came over and sat with me in silence, not knowing what to say. I appreciated them, but none of them understood. How could they? They didn't hear her voice when she said she was bored. They didn't see the glint in her eye when she mentioned her lover. That laughter, that casual cruelty, was burned into me. It wasn't just betrayal. It was humiliation. At night, I sat alone in the living room, scrolling through old pictures. I studied her smile, the way she leaned into me, the way her hand rested on my chest. I used to think those were real, moments frozen in love. But now, looking back, I saw them for what they were. Masks. Smiles that hid her restlessness. Smiles that probably meant nothing to her, while they had meant everything to me. The realization hit me so hard I felt nauseous. How much of my life had been a lie? How much of it was me loving someone who had already checked out? I could have drowned in those questions. I could have curled into myself, wasted away with grief. But something inside me shifted. I didn't scream. I didn't break things. I didn't drink myself into oblivion. Instead, I sat in silence and let the pain burn through me until it became something else. Resolve. If she wanted excitement, if she wanted to destroy our marriage so recklessly, then I would give her the consequences that came with her choices. The next morning, I booked an appointment with a lawyer. I still remember the look on his face as I sat across from him and calmly explained what had happened. He asked me questions, and I answered with precision. Yes, she admitted to leaving. Yes, she said she was staying with her lover. Yes, I had her words, her timing, even her new address. Every detail I provided was another nail in the coffin of the marriage she thought she could just walk away from without consequence. Walking out of that law office, I felt something I hadn't felt in days. Power. It wasn't the kind of power that roars. It was quiet, steady, unshakable. For the first time since she left, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a man taking control of his life again. Every form I signed, every document filed, became a step toward my revenge. Not the messy kind, not the shouting and throwing things kind, but the kind that cut deeper because it was clean, legal, and final. At night, when the tears still came, I let them fall. But I told myself each tear was not weakness, it was fuel. Fuel for the paperwork. Fuel for the restraining order I was planning against her lover. Fuel for the divorce that would end this marriage on my terms, not hers. She had laughed when she said she was bored. She had thought she could humiliate me, leave me in pieces. But in the quiet of my home, as I built case files and gathered proof, I knew the truth. She had no idea what storm she had created. And when it hit, it would be one she never saw coming. The first step I took was the divorce filing. The lawyer guided me through every detail, and I followed with an almost mechanical calm. Every signature felt like a blade carving the truth into stone. This was over. No more illusions, no more hoping she'd walk back through the door with regret in her eyes. She thought she left for excitement, but what she was going to find was that her so-called freedom came with consequences. Cold, legal consequences. I wasn't begging for closure. I was building it with paperwork that had weight, power, and finality. Next came the restraining order against her lover. I had enough evidence to prove harassment and interference in my marriage. The lawyer helped me draft it, each sentence tightening the trap she didn't even know she had walked into. It wasn't just about keeping him away from me. It was about exposing what kind of man he really was. If he thought he was inheriting my wife's life without any complications, he was wrong. He wasn't just inheriting her. He was inheriting the legal mess that followed her betrayal. The contrast between us couldn't have been clearer. She was out there laughing, thinking she had broken free of the boring husband who didn't excite her anymore. Maybe she believed she was finally living, finally tasting passion and thrill. And all the while I was sitting in silence, moving chess pieces she didn't even know were on the board. She thought she was in control, but I was already 2 steps ahead. Every phone call with my lawyer, every form I filled, every note I documented. It was me reclaiming control she thought she had stolen from me. There was a strange, bittersweet satisfaction in it. I didn't yell at her. I didn't show up at their door to make a scene. I didn't give her the drama she was probably expecting. My revenge was cleaner, sharper. My silence was punishment enough. Because silence was the one thing she couldn't manipulate. She couldn't twist it, couldn't argue with it, couldn't play the victim against it. My silence was the storm waiting to break. I imagined the moment she would receive the papers. Maybe she'd be lounging in his apartment, scrolling her phone like always, thinking life had finally tilted in her favor. Maybe she'd smirk, remembering how she told me she was bored, how she thought she'd humiliated me. And then the knock would come at the door. She'd open it, and instead of excitement, she'd find an envelope. Inside, her new reality. Divorce. Restraining order. The cold truth that the man she thought she'd destroyed wasn't broken at all. He was standing taller than ever, cutting her out of his life without hesitation. That thought didn't make me happy. Not in the way I once imagined happiness. It was bittersweet. Because even though I was reclaiming my power, I couldn't erase the years I had wasted, the love I had poured into her, the trust she had shattered. But at least now I wasn't powerless anymore. At least now I wasn't the man sitting in silence wondering what went wrong. I was the man turning that silence into a weapon. She didn't know it yet, but her new life, the one she ran to for excitement, was about to collapse under the weight of the consequences I had set in motion. And I didn't need to say a single word to make it happen. It didn't take long for the cracks to show in her so-called exciting new life. I heard through whispers, through friends of friends, that her lover wasn't the man she thought he was. The thrill that had lured her away from me was already fading, replaced by arguments, jealousy, and the harsh truth that passion without foundation burns out fast. She had left stability for chaos, and chaos doesn't love anyone for long. Then came the day she tried to come back. I'll never forget the sound of her voice on the phone, softer than I'd heard in years. She wanted to talk. She said things hadn't gone the way she imagined. She hinted at mistakes, at second thoughts, at wanting to figure us out. But her words didn't pierce me anymore. They barely reached me. Once, I would have leapt at them, desperate to hold on. Now, all I felt was a cold, steady distance. When she finally went to his apartment, expecting to slip back into comfort, she didn't find what she was looking for. Instead of a welcoming smile, she found an envelope. Divorce papers, a restraining order, cold, official documents that spelled out the truth she had tried to escape. Her husband wasn't waiting for her. Her lover couldn't protect her. The world she thought she had built on excitement was collapsing in her hands. I heard later that she cried, that she begged, that she even showed up outside my door one evening. Her face was streaked with tears. Her voice cracked as she asked me to let her explain. But by then, my heart was gone. The man she had once known, the one who fought for her, the one who overlooked the warning signs and carried all the weight of the marriage, that man no longer existed. I didn't slam the door. I didn't scream. I simply stood there in silence, my presence more final than any words I could have spoken. She had made her choice. and I had made mine. For the first time, I truly understood what dignity felt like. Not revenge in the fiery sense, not rage, but dignity. The strength to walk away without looking back, without begging for answers I no longer needed. She wanted excitement. I hoped she found it. What she actually found was the reality of her decisions. I walked away with nothing but my self-respect intact, and that was more valuable than anything she could have given me. The house was quieter, yes, the bed colder, but the silence no longer felt like punishment. It felt like peace. And in that peace, I discovered something far more powerful than revenge: closure. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't anger or screaming or trying to make someone feel what you felt. Sometimes the best revenge is finality. The kind that says, I survived you, I moved on, and you can never touch me again.